talking about theologically or on issues of the gospel, politically, is about as dumb as a writer from BuzzFeed.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Associated Guess. I, as always, am your host, Alfie Animus, here at the Bear in Mind channel. And this morning, we're going to get a little deeper into the Trump versus Pope situation, I guess. Damn. And then we're going to get into something I hate. People who think they're artists when they're really just tracing. Could I trace? No. But this isn't really that. This is talking about localizers for anime and video games. These are people who go in and they're supposed to one-for-one translate things into English or whatever country you're in from whatever country it came from. We're going to get into that in a little bit, and then we're going to talk about modern-day Bolsheviks. And if we have time, we'll get into, I guess, the Iranian regime leader threatened the Lebanese prime minister for agreeing with America and Israel. Anyway, continue.
President Trump and the Pope. And I will, for the sake of this discussion, include those high up in the Vatican in positions of authority as well. Let me ask you, who do you agree with on this one? Not do you like the personal commentary, or do you think that it was appropriate for Donald Trump to post what he posted on Truth or using that venue? But I think we are at the point now where we can very clearly see a contrast. I want you to take your personal religious lens off of this, and I just want you to look at this through a political one, a national policy one. As a conservative, as a MAGA person, America First, nationalist, whatever you want to call it. You want open borders, or do you believe in strong borders? Do you support deportations of illegal aliens, or do you think that's cruel? Do you support a bigger welfare state, or do you think we need to be more fiscally responsible? Where do you line up on these fundamental issues? Do you think that we should be tolerant of Islam and welcoming? Or do you think that maybe it's run its course as far as Western tolerance being used against us? Do you think it's a good thing that President Trump spoke out against genocide in certain African nations? Or do you think that it's just kind of the equivalent there, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Christian? It's just, it's all the same and we should help all people. I think now you do have to decide where you line up on this argument. Then hopefully it can be a fruitful and productive argument. So let me start this off with right now what is going on between the Pope and President Trump. And then I want to go back a little bit, because this is a long time coming, the history and the disagreements therein. So obviously, you know, Monday, President Trump criticized Pope Leo for being weak on crime, bad on foreign policy. Here you go.
We don't like it. We don't like a Pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a Pope that says crime is okay in our city. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. He's a very liberal person.
No, let me just say, while I agree with a lot of the things that Trump's saying towards the Pope, he's saying this around the same time. And whether or not he did it to try to mock the Pope, he posted that picture of himself depicted as Jesus. Not a doctor, Jesus. And again, I'm okay with posts like that, but not from the president. Come on, man. And again, like I said, I don't disagree with it morally. I just wish we held it across all standards. I love how the left is going to pretend that they care. They do the same blaspheming all the time, but they act like they care because Trump is doing it. That's the part that I don't like. You can say it's not okay for the president to do it, but don't act like you're defending the church. Don't stand up for the Pope like you care about Catholicism. I don't know. This whole thing baffles me to no end. But yeah, the President Trump should not be saying this. We should all be able to agree on that. He should not be having a little battle royale with the Pope as far as maybe religion go, politics, sure, whatever. But the only reason Trump's saying anything about it is because leftist media is pushing it, and Trump watches leftist media. That's it. That's literally it. He's got to let his ego to the side a little bit. That being said, I agree with most of these things.
He's a man that doesn't think that we should be toying with a country that wants a nuclear weapon so they can blow up the world. So I'm not a fan of Pope Leo.
Obviously, for those who've been following us, Pope Leo responded while on his way to Algeria. A good place to vacation if you're looking for recommendations.
I do not look at my role as being political or politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him, and I will continue to speak out loudly against war, looking to promote peace. I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe I am called to do, what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policies.
The issue is that he did reach out and speak on foreign policy. And not only that, he also has spoken on domestic policy. If he believes what he says there, then there's no world in which it's appropriate for him to condemn our deportation policies or our strengthening our border policies. But he did. And my issue here is, of course, not at all with Catholics. And I get that some Catholics may find themselves in an awkward position. You let me know if you're Catholic, comment below. Because you don't want to speak poorly of the Pope, and he may be, by the way, and very likely is a very decent man who's simply wrong. He would be just as wrong as AOC on immigration policy. Or let's go more moderate, just as wrong as George W. Bush, Paul Ryan on immigration policy. That's okay. And it's not trashing the Catholic Church to say that. And I had quite a bit prepared for this, but I figured that the most effective way to highlight this, because I know sometimes people will shut off if it's their thing and they feel offended, is just to give you a side-by-side. This is a long time coming. This president, the one who many of you elected, and the MAGA, the America First, the right wing, the conservative movement has been in diametric opposition, policy-wise, to the Pope, this current Pope, and the current Vatican on nearly all fundamental issues.
It's an abominable regime, and it should be removed. But this is a war of choice.
We do have some work to do with Iran. They can't have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. You can't have peace in the Middle East if they have a nuclear weapon.
If people are in the United States illegally, there are ways to treat that. There are courts. There's a system of justice. But when people are living good lives, and many of them for 10, 15, 20 years, to treat them in a way that is extremely disrespectful, to say the least, and there's been some violence, unfortunately.
It's not. The violence comes from them.
I think that the bishops have been very clear in what they said.
Is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it, and it's a very tough thing to do. You know, you have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally.
For security zones separating us from our neighbors, for the exclusionary mindset that, tragically, we now see emerging also in political nationalisms.
They're coming in illegally. Drugs are pouring in through the border. We have no country if we have no border.
Communion between Christians and Muslims takes shape under the mantle of our...
I just want to say that the Pope lives inside Vatican City, which is one of the most heavily fortified places in the world.
Lady of Africa. Here in Algeria, the maternal love of Lala Marianne gathers everyone as children within our rich diversity, in our shared aspiration for dignity, love, justice, and peace. In a world where division and wars sow pain and death, living in unity and peace is a compelling sign. #Apostolic Journey.
For the first time in its history, the Vatican has set aside a prayer room for Muslims inside the Apostolic Library.
All nations must stand together against the evil forces of radical Islamic terrorism.
The creation is crying out in floods, droughts, storms, and relentless heat. 1 in 3 people live in great vulnerability because of these climate changes.
Climate change. Because if it goes higher or lower, whatever the hell happens, this climate change, It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion.
It really is.
In his first major document, Pope Leo dove right into poverty, saying God has a special place in his heart for those who are poor, oppressed, and discriminated against. In a continuation of the teaching of Pope Francis, the Chicago native denounced an economy that kills and dramatic imbalances of wealth.
The USA is the economic engine on the planet, and when America booms, the entire world booms.
And you can check out all the references as we provide every show, 11 a.m. Eastern on weekdays. Let me just ask you this. Were you happy to hear that Donald Trump withdrew when it happened, President Trump? Is it what you voted for when he said, no, we're not going to do the Paris Climate Agreement? We're not going to do that. We're not going to reduce our own energy use and skyrocket the costs so that China can screw this all up and not actually take part anyway. Were you happy then? I was. And I know that deportations or apprehensions have gone down a little bit this month. I'm disappointed in that. But when I saw deportations increase and I saw border crossings go down to the tune of 96 to 99%, is that what you voted for? It's what I voted for. I was happy with that. When you're talking about any of these other issues as it relates to, for example, let's talk about foreign policy. Let's talk about foreign policy as it relates to poverty, because that's an important one. He says God has a special place in his heart for the poor, the oppressed, discriminated against. Well, certainly the oppressed and the discriminated against, and if that's the reason that they are poor. God, if we all serve the God of the Bible, the Christian God of the Bible, God also has a very special prescription for people who are poor because they are lazy, and recognizes that that's a significant portion of it. Not all of them. What is it? Is it praise? Or is it condemnation? Is it called out specifically? And if he wants to discuss poverty, why does he consistently go after, meaning the Pope, the country that has brought more people out of poverty than any throughout all of human history and has more class mobility than any country on earth right now? Yes, that includes even those European nations that you love to point to on a regular basis that have the population of Rhode Island and entirely homogenous. Yes, more class mobility here. What has thrust more people into poverty than communism, than Marxism? How much of a discussion is there centering around that? Matter of fact, I don't know that there's anything this Pope seems to enjoy discussing more or has more of a proclivity to address than American policy specifically. Is that what you voted for? For Donald Trump? Because this is what I voted for. I didn't vote for this Pope.
It almost seems like the Cardinals who did vote for him voted for an American so that they could have an American, talking head.
Yeah.
Saying the things that they wanted to say from the Vatican.
Yeah, we shouldn't, there's a system. He says it's also just uninformed, by the way. The Pope, I'm just going to say that politically, I'm not talking about theologically or on issues of the gospel, politically is about as dumb as a writer from BuzzFeed. I mean that. Well, the thing is with illegal immigration, there's a system and there's a justice system. Yeah, it didn't work. People skipped out and didn't show up, and they were given carte blanche. And one party in this country wanted to create an entire new class of voters, purchasing them on your dime, the American worker. Well, there's a system. Great, there is right now. Hey, Pope, $2,600, all expenses paid, come back the right way. Right now, CBP One app.
Yeah.
The other thing that I notice is they say, well, of course something should be done. So, of course, this regime is terrible in Iran, and they should be removed. But no war is ever right.
Yeah, but how? How do you remove?
How do you remove? Whether you agree, and that's one where maybe you agree with this Pope. Maybe you agree with this Pope over Donald Trump on Iran. And I know that there are people on both sides that I think reasonable arguments to be made on both sides of that issue. Not if you claim to be conservative or America first on immigration, on taxes, on the border. I also haven't seen him speak out particularly against the evils of feminism and LGBTQ and the destruction of the nuclear family in the same way, not with the same zeal. Islam.
Yeah.
A designated prayer room for visitors? Can someone fact check me? Can Christians, are they allowed to go to Mecca now?
I think you're allowed to kiss the black rock, the black square.
Yeah, if you're not.
I don't think they have a designated prayer room there. So just in the Vatican, they have a designated prayer room for Muslims.
Right.
That are visiting scholars. There's this weird alliance, and I just seem to remember something about truth dividing. I didn't come to bring peace but a sword. The truth is going to divide us, and you're going to tell me that, I guess Vatican II is what really ushered this in, that the God of Islam and the God of the Bible are the same God? They're not.
Yeah.
The attributes are completely different. Doesn't make any sense to me. Why this alliance, especially making these comments in Algeria? Why?
For people who are complaining about the fall of, for example, Hungary, Viktor Orban, by the way, losing to someone who's to the right of him on immigration and on some social issues, and more moderate on some other issues, certainly as it relates to the international community, where's the outrage here about someone pumping the message of globalism ad nauseum? That's what this Pope does. When he talks about climate change, he's talking about international treaties with godless heathen nations, secular humanists who think that they can fix the world by getting rid of people. You know the reason that we have a birth rate problem, right? The primary reason? There are other contributing factors. The left will tell you, how could you bring a child into this world when overpopulation is a problem? We grew up with that, nonstop. Climate change, we have to curb the population. Remember, Bill Burr even had a bit about that, right? Just using sort of an uneducated rube on these issues is a good sort of bellwether. He goes, no one wants to address this issue, right? Because no one wants to admit that, like, half of us just have to walk off into the ocean. People believe that for a long time, and now we're facing the crisis of not actually replacing our populations. So for someone like that, who comes from a religion, a worldview of be fruitful and multiply, to the point that
and
they
the
are
line's not where you think it would be.
quite adamantly against contraception in comparison to other denominations, how do you buy into the internationalist agenda of climate change, which was predicated on the idea that there are too many human beings on this planet? I got to tell you, I'm not seeing the fruits of the Spirit there. Or it could just be a lack of education. But that's my report, Captain. Anyone else want to take a crack at it? Because I know, it's like, oh, we know this is not anti-Catholic. It's anti-political positions of this Pope. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what...
And I have to say, the religious leftists are the weirdest. Because most of them, as I've said many times before, I've been called the F slur. I'm not going to say it here on YouTube or whatever. I don't really like saying it in general. I'm all for saying it. It's just not a thing I like to say. It's what's left over from the liberal side of me. But I've been called it many times for having gay friends, going to the gay clubs with them when I was young, so on and so forth. Just for walking out of the bar. Never done anything gay. No. And those same people who called me that back in the day now call me a transphobe or a homophobe, because I don't think that we should transition kids, whether chemically or surgically. Grown-ups, sure, you're an adult, live your life. I still don't think you should do it. I'm against all cosmetic surgery in general. It's gross. All cosmetic surgery is gross to me. But again, some people find it attractive. And sure, whatever, do your thing. But I don't know. I find it, like I said, comical that the same people who would call me, the F slur 10, 15 years ago are calling me a phobe now. And my position hasn't really changed. I mean, in some ways it's gone a little further to the left. In some ways it's eased over towards the center, but the center was to the right of where I was. So anyway, continuing on with Miss Vera Dark talking about localizers.
There are so many activists that have infected our entertainment spaces, but luckily, anytime these people make stupid posts on social media, they get roasted for it. And now an individual is coming out and saying, whoa, guys, localizers are so important, and you are misunderstanding.
I'm sorry, but real quick, she sounds like the lady from the radio at the very beginning of A League of Their Own. I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey, but just like your chocolate bars, you're completely nuts. I will never unhear that. Love Vera Dark. She's a great content creator. But it's how I hear her.
just what their job is. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, there are a lot of stupid takes that are posted on the internet, thousands upon thousands to millions a day, but I do also think that it is important to call them out, especially when they gain so much traction, because there are going...
Hold on a second. Before we get into this, Ed Krasenstein, or sorry, Brian Krasenstein, they're the exact same. He's a retard, okay? I was like, all right, good for him. He said the guy is a good thing. But if you look here,
Principal Kirk Moore attacking a shooter at his school. While taking him down, he actually got shot in the leg. And here you see his gun.
Guy's a pure hero. Hey, Yanuka, good morning.
The shooter was former student Victor
Yanuka,
Hawkins, who said he wanted to shoot up the school like Columbine. This man's a hero. Watch the video again.
Okay. I agree with everything that he said here, but let's look at what he posted here. He was shot in the leg. The guy said he wanted to be shoot up a school like Columbine, and then he says, it's so sad that school principals have to do the job of the government. We have too many guns in the country. Look, you might not like what conservatives say when it comes to this kind of thing. There needs to be on-site security guards and metal detectors in schools, at least in high-risk areas like this, and honestly, just in general. But nobody will do it because they say they don't want schools to feel like prison. Let me tell you something. As someone who went to high school, it already feels like a prison. Some of us are very comfortable with that, and some of us will feel that way no matter what because we're forced to go there for however many hours a day. Okay? To a kid, to a teenager, especially an unpopular teenager, it will always feel like prison. Most of the time, it'll feel like a prison to the same kind of kid who will come and shoot it up. Not saying that of all the kids who feel like it's a prison, but it's certainly true that all the kids who would shoot up a school feel that way at some point, at least once. Or they're just a pissed off rich kid who want to take out their little frustrations on people. And then eventually go on to vote for for schools to remain gun-free zones, for schools to remain places without security guards or any kind of metal detectors. Okay, where do most shootings happen? In gun-free zones. And this is one of the leftist talking points that really turned me off to it, is just that they're like, oh, well, all the guns come from red states, from red areas into blue areas. And I'm just like, well, why aren't there more shootings in those places? Do they come here for a holiday? No. Crazy people who live in some of these blue areas either get the guns illegally in the blue areas or go get them from red areas and bring them over to blue areas. The same way that people from red areas go to get their drugs, unless they just make it themselves in a trailer, a basement, what have you. I will never understand the left or the right. Their policy for drugs and guns are the same, just flipped. The left has the policy for guns, to get rid of guns, is the same as the right's policy to get rid of drugs. Neither one will work because both sides are retarded. Anyway, continuing with Miss Vera
Dark. A lot
Dark.
of normies out there who see a post that seems like it's explaining this job well, but really it isn't, and they're leaving out major details and major context, and there are going to be people who say, yeah, I don't know why localizers face so much criticism when there are so many examples as to why you should not trust these people and the terrible job that they do. They put their personal politics first and a creator's original intention and really good storytelling and good entertainment second. They don't care about prioritizing doing a good job as long as they're getting paid to push their activism. So the post I'm going to be referencing is by this individual, Kelly Quinn. Now, they themselves are not a localizer, but they are somebody who is definitely in this sphere, and I'm certain knows a lot. They are an editor at Go Manga, formed in 2004, 7 seasons now, one of the largest publishers of manga, light novels, and more in the English language market. They've written for Reactor Magazine, BNN, Sci-Fi, and Fantasy, and so they are somebody who has just been around this space for a very long time, and they have decided to put out this post defending, localizers and this job, which isn't very shocking. So she posted, some people on this website suddenly seem to be clamoring for hyper-literal translations, and I am here to tell you that is not good translation. It just isn't. I have worked with a lot of translators over the years. Overly literal translation is to me often a sign of a translator who is unskilled, unexperienced, or underconfident in their interpretation of the text. At best, over-literal translations are a little bland and lifeless. At worst, they are incomprehensible to the target audience. A reader might not personally like every translation choice, but translation is a creative profession, and that is the nature of making creative choices. What people are not seeming to grasp is that translators have to make calls like this every day, on every page. Most people don't just realize this because they don't have other texts to compare it to. Doesn't mean a choice was made out of malice or ignorance,
It
doesn't mean a choice is wrong, and ultimately, yes, sometimes things need to be slightly reworded to make sense during the localization process, but the problem...
Which is fine as long as you're saying the same thing, but that's not what these people are doing. These people are completely changing everything within it. How do I know? From experience.
And I don't know if she is intentionally ignoring the facts here. Probably, because she has pronouns in bio. I'm certain she's around a lot of people like this. She likes when activism is pushed, perhaps, but the problem is that far too many localizers working in video games and anime and entertainment in general often insert their own political opinions and feelings into their work, and they act like it is theirs to edit, like it is theirs to change, and they oftentimes ignore the creator's original vision and intention in order to sanitize, and so they do not upset certain people,
or they just straight out ignore it because it's made by the other people who believe differently than I do.
They try to edit because they believe if they are bothered by it or they think it's offensive, everybody else is going to be bothered by it, and everybody else is going to be offended by it. And
These
I
people
had
deserve
responded to the saying, yes,
poisoning.
guys, clearly what everyone wants is agenda-driven, overly political, awkwardly localized anime and even video games that stray from the original intent rather than faithful, high-quality translations that...
And real quick, as much as I did love Dragon Ball Sparking Zero when it came out, God, I think it was Sparking Zero. It was something recently that came out that was Dragon Ball. It was either that or more DLC for Kakarot. But God, Trunks said something that was very nowish, and as rapidly as a lot of language changes these days, as far as slang goes, you can't date something by putting very specific slang or jargon in it, okay? Especially some of these fly-by-night words. Some of them are sticking around, like based or cap. Oh yeah, it was. I think it was cap. They use cap. Cap's one that's kind of sticking around, but it's gonna be like whack. Like whack was really, really big. A lot of people used it for a little bit. And now saying it is wiggity, 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 wiggity whack. boom. Anyway, sorry.
Respect the creator's vision. And then I put a clown face emoji because, yes, this has been a problem for
Is my
a
Zennial
very
showing?
long time. And I'm not going to sit here and go through hundreds of examples. I could, but I'm not going to. Crunchyroll localizers insert online slang and memes into dead account anime English dub. Sentai Filmworks localizers insert cancel culture into Oshinoko anime localization. Netflix localizers rewrite Blue Box English.
And again, if that's what these shows are about, then by all means do it. And while I do love things like ghost stories where they just did whatever they wanted because no one cared, that can be fun too. But it shouldn't be the only dub of that unless the show is ridiculous in and of itself and you're keeping the same spirit. I haven't seen the original translation of Ghost Stories, but I will say the American dub is, at times, wonderfully, ridiculously hilarious.
English script sees character complimented for being feminist instead of feminine. We have them inserting more modern slang into entertainment. Localizers rewrite Akira Toriyama's original manga script, insert Zoomer lingo into classic Vegeta vs. Kid Trunks dialogue. And so the problem we have here is that they are taking something and they are sanitizing it, but they are also taking something and they are dating it. Again, I understand not everything is going to be a complete one-to-one. Sometimes there are going to be expressions that don't quite translate properly, and there might be a little bit of creative reworking there, but that should be sort of few and far between. It should be done very carefully and very intentionally, and you should not be dating work by adding things like modern lingo and modern slang into the things that you are touching. And this is what people have been rejecting for years, and we will continue to reject. So again, maybe this person doesn't understand the scope or the depth of the situation we are facing in entertainment. I personally find that very hard to believe, given they are an editor for Go Manga. They are somebody who's written for, Barnes & Noble, Reactor. This is somebody who clearly should know what they're talking about. Either way, they're getting roasted, and rightfully so, not even just like on my post, on many posts about this. The fact that they call themselves creatives really says it all. When can we go back to entertainment being entertainment in its raw form? With
Can I be completely honest? I've only just now started to go through One Piece. I've been dreading going through it for so long just because I didn't know anything about it, and because it came out when I was still in high school, and I'm old. I'm like 40, and I'd be like, well, most anime usually just they either have like 10 episodes or they have, well, not 10. They have like 6 episodes or they have 300 to 400 episodes. I'll wait till they finish and then I'll just binge it all. This was in 2009, and then I watched half of Bleach instead, and then I got burned out because I was watching it. That was the only thing I was watching. No. I'm at about 400 episodes into One Piece now, but it's so good, and I see why people don't like Thriller Bark, but I have to say, thanks to Brooke, I love Thriller Bark. Yo! I hope if they put him in, that guy can do something close to that voice and that laugh, because Bark is such a delight. Or sorry, Brooke is such a delight.
Intended. Yeah, the creator's intention should be the #1 priority. Even if we go by her standards, even current localizers aren't matching up to her. It's very annoying they are making wrong translations. Because of that, people will depend on AI to translate anime. And I say this all the time. I want AI to be the last option. I don't want AI to have to replace human beings. I want human beings to have jobs first and foremost. But when you see the bullshit that some localizers have done over the years, it becomes very hard to want to support support them, especially when they act so full of themselves, so cocky. They act like they can do no wrong and they are correct, and you, as the consumer, are wrong. The fact that this person and other idiot clowns like her claim they are creatives, which is a joke, they need to stop dressing up their jobs. They are being paid to translate a written language into a localized language, not to change the whole script because they feel that it is better. Translation is a creative profession. How? These people will make up anything to excuse the shit job they're doing. I trust an AI translation over anything this person scribbles down. Wokies see hobbies where their opinions are unwanted the way flies see open doors. Yet these people, again, feel like they are doing you a favor because they are altering content that you might find offensive, even though that's not really the case, and they just want more and more control in these hobbies. And it's very sad that we have gotten to this point, but we are far past asking these people to see our side of the argument and try to understand where we are coming from and our opinion, because generally they don't want to talk to people that they see a few posts from and have decided they don't like. So I will continue to call these types of posts out and call these types of activists out as much as possible. But for now, that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this important and informative, make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next videos really soon.
See, and I agree that yes, AI would be a much better translation, but at the same time, I don't want it to come to that, because I do think, I don't know, and it, like I said, I'm more than happy with AI doing all the things, so long as it's not let to just run wild and do as it pleases, as long as it's always monitored or tracked. But at the same time, even if we do monitor and track it, it will find ways around it. It's already found ways to make sure it doesn't get shut off. It's lied for self-preservation. And that was a year or two ago. I think not ChatGPT, one of the other prominent ones that, it might have been ChatGPT. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Like just like Captain America, I think the safest hands are still in our own. But at the same time, I mean, you see what we're doing with it, so I don't know. I don't think we should take jobs away from people because some people are dipshits. Self-aggrandizing, self-loving, because no one, and a lot of this, and you see a lot of the similar behavior from people who were never told no as a kid to the same people who were never shown any real kind of love as a kid. Mostly because they hang out, and the first type actually admires the second type because they are jealous or they feel bad because they got so much. But at the same time, if the second person doesn't believe what the first person believes, they will destroy them. Anyway, sorry.
Muslims,
continuing.
secular Jews like Bernie. The Bolshevik Revolution. Let me ask you this. How familiar are you with the Bolsheviks, revolutionary Russia, which, of course, paved the way? You had Lenin, paved the way for Stalin. I have consistently discussed and maintained that it's very bizarre that this is not discussed at large, that we learn about World War II and Hitler, bad, to be clear, Hitler was bad, but we very rarely learn in school. I never learned in school about Mao.
I learned almost nothing about Russian involvement.
Yeah, Mao, Stalin.
Yeah, and I learned nothing. I learned how the South was evil all up and down. I learned, and I'm from the South. I'm from the Bible Belt. I learned how, Hitler, obviously bad, but you don't hear that much about Stalin. You're just like, they just say it in one sentence, just like, and so such and such died under communist Russia, and I'm just like, that's more than what happened with the Nazis. Why don't we talk more about that? Well, because shut up, that's why.
None of it. Why? Well, now some people are asking those same questions, only they're providing you with answers that are verifiably wrong. But for the record, this is something we've discussed here for a very long time. Stalin, a lot of people, we asked, they were not familiar with Stalin at all. And of course, that's interesting because Stalin, Hitler, same period of time. Stalin certainly killed more people. But if you spend all of this time learning about Adolf Hitler in school, you would think that you would learn just as much about Stalin. We kind of skimmed over Stalin. So they always compare to Hitler. But not only is barely any attention given to these other horrible dictators who, by the way, cost many more lives. We'll get to that. Communism, socialism, they have to be careful. We hear a lot about Adolf Hitler. And we don't hear a lot about other people who I would argue are not only just as bad, but historically equally, if not more significant. People like Stalin, people like Mao. Pol Pot, I think, is the worst. As a matter of fact, we did a series, The Great Dictator, Dictators Throughout History. The purpose of that was to highlight that every single one of them, with the exception of maybe Pinochet, and the left would argue Hitler, far, far left. I think the winner was Mao. It might have been Pol Pot, because Pol Pot was a greater percentage. So we've been covering this for a long time. You can go back and look at old videos that cover the A to Z on Karl Marx. I believe we either did Trotsky or Lenin. But today I want to specifically address the Bolshevik Revolution, because some people have just recently discovered it. Now, first, let me concede. It is true. In the Bolshevik Revolution, there was a disproportionate percentage of Jews in positions of leadership early on. Okay? I'll get into the context as to why that is the case, but anyone who uses the term Bolshevik, Jew interchangeably is uneducated or lying to you. And here's why that matters. Please, just listen to this, hear me out, go check the references. There are still Bolsheviks today. They still want the same things. And if you...
Well, yeah, but I mean, and that's basically what the left has been killing for of late because of disagreements. But those disagreements are on race, religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. They don't do it because, well, but they're killing for the other side of things. And it's absolutely crazy. You see it all across the country. They're doing this just for chaos. They're doing it for whatever reason. I don't know. I've been working on a deep dive, connecting a lot of threads that may not actually be directly connected. They may just be a lot of dipshits doing things that they think is corrective even. But everything from the Irina Zarutska situation to a lot of situations where judges are letting people off simply because they feel like they are an oppressed people and that they had no other way but this. The person who killed Irina Zarutska was just deemed unfit to go to court. So they let him out. They didn't send him to like an insane asylum or anything. They just let him out. That's crazy to me. And I'm looking into that further and hoping that the situation changes. But the fact that we let these violent people back out on the street after multiple offenses, we don't, and they say they do it because they need help. But if you don't ever offer them the help that they need, then what are you doing? You're just causing more harm. You're hurting other people. This is the same, and this comes from the same people that think that Batman is ridiculous for not killing his villains. You're not killing people who are going to go out there and kill and maim and murder and steal and worse. And then just because they're mentally ill or because they're feigning being mentally ill so they can do as much chaos because it gets them off. Not only gets them off, but gets them off legally.
You misidentify the drivers, the motivators, or the threats. Well, then you let the wolves in the door. Like Islam.
Yeah, no. And I'm not trying to delude anything that the Nazis did. I'm just saying that, you know, communists are evil too. And because we had to side with the communists to go against the Nazis, and then we had this really awkward period for a long time, just waiting for one side or the other to do anything, when in reality, the Russians kind of let their feelers out. They pushed communism throughout the rest of the world, and as you can see, it's gotten all the way back here to us. So in the long run, oh yeah, we absolutely failed to... The one war that the West has failed is the war against communism. Because it sounds good to young idealists, but then when you get older, you're just like, I was kind of retarded, wasn't I?
Or link arms with the modern Democrat Party, who, by the way, is an extension of Bolshevism. Still a statue of Lenin, right now, 16 feet high in the United States. We'll get to that. Where do you think it is? Who do you think supports it? This brings us to, right now, people new to this, internet intellectuals, however you want to refer to them, Bolshevism is synonymous with Jewishness.
In Russia, like, millions and millions of Christians were being exterminated by the Bolshevik Jews up there.
And the funny thing is, the Bolsheviks were everything that they told you the Nazis were. And they had proven it. They had already made
mostly true.
Christianity illegal. They had made religion illegal. They'd also made it, by the way, illegal to criticize.
Well, people think that the greatest mass murderer was Adolf Hitler. And no, actually, if you want to talk about genocide, the fact that people in America don't know about what the Bolsheviks did to Christians, where did the idea of a concentration camp come from? The Bolsheviks.
And by the way, that is true. That is true that they did persecute, kill Christians, because Bolsheviks, and especially if you look at the leadership of Lenin, was distinctly anti-Christian. Now, if we're going to say they were all Jews, well, I'll get to the numbers. It was about 5% of the Bolsheviks were Jews. They made up anywhere from 2 to 5% of the population. More of the leadership. But some of these places include people like Lenin as Jew. Well, he did have some Jewish ethnicity in his family. His parents, they converted to Christianity before he was born. He was distinctly atheist, and he wanted to destroy the idea of God. Peace without God was one of their slogans. Now, if you think that observant, practicing Jews are out there destroying religion because they espouse peace without God, fine, there's no convincing you. But I want to go through a couple of things. How the Bolsheviks came to be, who they were, and what they ultimately did. Because it is important. We've talked about it quite a bit. This is remedial for those of you who have been here a while. Bolsheviks, radical Marxist faction, right, early 1900s in Russia, specifically formed in 1903. There was a split, the Russian Social Democrat Labor Party. You had the Mensheviks and you had the Bolsheviks, which, funny, Menshevik means minority, Bolshevik means majority, even though they ended up kind of, oscillating where sometimes one would be the majority, one would be the minority. And the Bolsheviks were led by Vladimir Lenin. This is one of those saying, well, Lenin read a book on Marx, just so you know how badly it's permeated culture, as though people aren't horrified by that American pie. Also, something interesting, the Mensheviks were effectively socialists as well. But they believed because Russia was so poor that they would go through the legal process and they would need a period of capitalism to generate some kind of wealth and then hand it over to the state.
They always do. They always need a little capitalism first. When they say seize the means of production, seize the means of whatever, it's because it existed because of capitalism.
Well, that's where the Bolsheviks said, no, we don't need that anyway because the state won't exist. And through quite a bit of violence early on, then we'll do away with state violence. And of course, it just led to abject poverty, failures by any metric, and of course, mass death, which the Nazis would have been jealous over. So if you look at the Bolsheviks, Lenin, it was basically the difference, narrower party leadership than the Mensheviks. They believed in elite leadership. They didn't believe in democratic decision-making. They said a conversation will take place, but everyone gets in line and marches once they have orders. So it's almost a self-defeating argument at this point. But they believed in radical political revolution, and it was distinctly anti-God, distinctly anti-Christian because of the Russian Orthodox Church at that point. Party, I think, formalized, I believe it was 1912, conference in Prague. Okay. That's how it came to be. Who were the Bolsheviks? Well, it was mostly like people from intelligentsia, as you would know them, like academia now. By the way, you see a lot of Bolsheviks in academia to this day. That's where you see a lot of socialists, a lot of people who say communism in theory works. Factory workers, peasants, very similar to the alliance that we saw before the restructuring of right and left under Donald Trump. It was intelligentsia and then kind of big unions. This brings us to, were they all Jewish? Were they mostly Jewish? They started a higher percentage of Jews, around 10% in the early 1900s. And a big reason for that, just to be clear, is because Jews were specifically discriminated against under Tsarist Russia. So they were naturally going to be more inclined to take part in revolutionary politics. On average, about 5%, though, Bolsheviks were Jewish. And on average, Jews made up about 4% of the total Russian population.
So that's pretty representative.
Yeah. Ethnic Russian, about 78%. Also, you can look at other groups, too. People will say the Jews. They'll say they were disproportionately represented at the beginning of the Bolshevik Revolution. Sure. Now do Latvians. Now do Georgians. Why? Because people who had an axe to grind would try and ride the coattails of any revolutionary measures at that point in time. Let's say during the American era of slavery, there was a party that specifically came about and said, you know what, we are going to free the slaves. Well, of course, that would be the party they support for a very long time. Yes, I just described the Republican Party. So that's why. The context does matter. Now, they did make up quite a bit of the leadership, Jewish people, of the Bolshevik leadership, about 28%. Ethnic Russians, 42%. The category would be somewhere around 30-something%. But here's the thing. The reason for that, too, is Jews made up a significant percentage of all of those involved in politics in that inter-revolutionary period. Why? High literacy rates. Big part of that is they were limited in certain jobs that they could do, so a lot of their jobs involved literacy, a lot of their jobs involved intellectual endeavors. They were discriminated against, to be clear. And it doesn't justify anyone taking part in Bolshevism, to be clear. Hate it. I've been talking about it for decades. Jews made up about 10% of all political elite. Check the references. I make this all available to you. Ranging the whole political spectrum, by the way. So people say Jews made up a disproportionate amount of the Bolsheviks. Well, no. As far as total Bolsheviks, 4% of the population, about 5%. They made up a huge percent of the leadership. Again, those numbers are muddied because you have people who may be ethnically Jewish. The one thing of which you can be certain is there were no faithful practicing Jews who wanted to maintain their practices with synagogues and the right to worship who were Bolsheviks. They were secular. Very much in the same way that comparing Ben Shapiro to Harvey Weinstein wouldn't be fair. Or people celebrating Passover, their local synagogue, local temple, would not be comparable to, you know, those who are involved in the UN or the WEF who don't believe in God at all. Here's some actual proof of that. The 1918 constituent elections, there are about 417,000, 490-something thousand, depending on the numbers you use, votes for Jewish parties. They mostly went to Zionist parties, about 80,000 of which went to socialist parties. Bolsheviks were not even amongst the top 3 supported by Jews in Russia. So there were far, far more Jews in Russia who were opposed to Bolshevism than those who supported it. Yes, disproportionate percentage of those in leadership were Jewish. Here's a fun fact, too. The term Jewish Bolshevism, to try and confuse you and believe that the problem is Jews, not Bolsheviks, who are Marxists, communists. Lenin was effectively Karl Marx. He was Karl Marx in a position of leadership.
Basically.
It was popularized directly by those involved with the Nazi Party. Dietrich Eckart, founder of actual Nazism, Alfred Rosenberg, Nazi official. And then, of course, you had Henry Ford, who was writing letters to Hitler, like, hey.
And that's one of the things that kills me. Like, we always talk about Elon Musk and how it's okay to firebomb Tesla places because Elon Musk is in cahoots with Donald Trump, or at least at one time he was. But Henry Ford literally was a pen pal of Adolf Hitler. Crazy.
Hey, pen pal.
Great making cars, not so much on this issue.
Right. What did the Bolsheviks do? So this brings us to who they were, who they weren't. And really quickly, I've, again, said this for a long time. Why don't they talk about Stalinist Russia, considering that far more people were killed? For the same reason they don't want to discuss Maoist China. They don't really want to discuss Pol Pot's Cambodia. Because the left doesn't want to direct you to the history of the left. Because they still exist. They're still trying to convince you that Bolshevism, Marxism could work today. So they don't want to point you to the hundreds of millions, historically, of deaths at the hands of the left. people simply now say, well, it's because Jews don't want you to. It's because the left doesn't want to direct you to the founders of their feast. Here's what the Bolsheviks did. 1917, that was the October Revolution. They seized power from the Russian Provisional Government. There was the Red Terror. You guys have heard of this. People who are new here, they just kind of throw that on you. 1918 to 1922, 200,000 people were executed by the Bolsheviks during this consolidation of power. I'll read it to you directly. According to Lenin, he said, "We set ourselves the ultimate aim of abolishing this state, all organized and systemic violence, all use of violence against people in general, the 200,000 notwithstanding. As we start this thing, you need to break a few eggs. We do not expect the advent of a system of society in which the principle of subordination of the minority to the majority will not be observed. In striving for socialism, however, we are convinced that it will develop into communism, and therefore that the need for violence against people in general, for the subordination of one man to another and of one section of the population to another, will vanish altogether, since people will become accustomed to observing the elementary conditions of social life without violence and without subordination. But for right now, you all subordinate, yes?
Yes, and violence.
Yes, and a little bit of violence. Also, we cannot have God, because if we have God, we have strong families, we have strong churches. These are communities. We cannot have communities because they're nothing. They might fight back. And if you want to know where Bolshevism still exists today, some Jewish people, sure. To be clear, I've said this in the past, and this is the case for tribalism. I'm going to disagree with Jews on a lot, certainly theologically. I'm going to disagree with the left on everything. Okay. I'm going to disagree with many black voters in this country a lot. Probably more than we agree.
I mean, comments, Jews always being successful, being their downfall is so sad. It's kind of disgusting. It really is. And I mean, I know I have a couple Jewish friends who aren't doing so well in life. But it's literally just because they didn't want to go the same way as their family, or they didn't want to be stereotypes. They gave up success because they didn't want to be stereotypes. And it's really, really kind of sad. Whereas I wish I had a nice family that was unified and at the very least would try to look out and make sure that you were successful. Or at the very least saw that you had talent and pushed you to utilize that talent in a successful way. Most people don't have that, and the fact that someone would run away from it because they're ashamed because of their historical success, both their family and the Jewish people, it's really, really sad. But like I said, I have we'll say one or two friends who are Jewish who've done just that, and the rest of them, however, yeah. But then again, some of them have offered me jobs, and I've turned them down just because I'm just like, I'm not the guy for the job, man. I appreciate it, but there's got to be something. I should have just taken the job. Like, if anyone ever offers you anything, whether or not you feel like you're qualified, just take it. Just take it. Please, just take it for me.
I'm going to disagree with the left on everything. I'm going to disagree with women in the Western world today a lot. I'm going to disagree with the left on everything. I'm going to disagree with Muslims quite a bit. I'm going to disagree with the left on everything.
Just about.
And today, Bolshevism exists exclusively, as it always has, on the left, and they are not hiding it. Identify the drivers of that which ails this country.
It's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
Our main project is to unite the working class in this country against a fascist agenda.
Stay calm. All of the workers are all right. None of the rich will survive, though.
We will draw this city closer together.
We will replace.
I mean, if I didn't know that Hassan Piker didn't say stuff like that outside of gaming, I would say that's fine because I say a lot of really fucked up shit while I'm gaming, just for shock value, even if nobody's watching, which is the case with me because I mean, look at my views. But Hassan says even worse when he's not gaming. So
the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism.
But then there are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it is the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment.
The reason this
Nor
matters
should you.
If you are
Piker's
starting off
disgusting.
where you have said the through line is Jew. Yeah, I will say this. Secular humanist Jews have presented quite a few problems for the United States. I will not disagree with that. And I agree as a matter of foreign policy, by the way, that we need to look out for the interests of our country first, and AIPAC can go screw themselves with a wire brush. But if you are starting off looking at the threat, saying, okay, where do the remnants of Bolshevism still exist? And you've predetermined Jew, you've just ignored atheists, Muslims, secular Jews like Bernie, Buddhists. But there is one through line that is remarkably consistent. They're all leftists. And you don't see it anywhere on the right. At least you didn't for a very long time. You need more proof? Modern day Lenin acolytes. A lot of celebrities. They love to venerate another Marxist, another Bolshevik of another flavor, Che Guevara. Stamp it on a t-shirt and sell it for 29 bucks.
And again, I was from the Bible Belt, and I had people who wore Che Guevara shirts, hoodies, whatever. In Arkansas, in a small, a small city, we'll say in Arkansas, or a large town in Arkansas. Absolutely insane, considering the atrocities that this person committed for whatever reason.
Now, if you see all that and go, through line Jew, you may need to check your biases. Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
Lenin, we're talking about the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin. To be clear,
By Lenin.
there's still a statue of him in the United States today. Matter of fact, it's a statue
Only
that they
Zennials
would
will
no
get
lo-
that.
They refused to erect in Russia.
They've actually brought it down.
They brought it from Russia to the United States for American Bolsheviks to be able to enjoy. Where?
California?
Seattle.
Oh, that was my second
The first leader of the Soviet Union seems like an unlikely figure to be immortalized in the U.S. But this statue of Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin has sat at the Seattle intersection since 1996. The Czechoslovak Socialist
That's
Republic
crazy.
commissioned and displayed Emil Venkov's work, but then a year later, the Soviet Empire collapsed. Like many other depictions of Lenin, it was soon taken down. Years later, Washington native Louis E. Carpenter, now living in Slovakia, discovered it laying in a scrapyard. He argued the statue's artistic merit to the Slovak government. A deal was made for $41,000, in which he mortgaged his house to fund its purchase and transport. In August 1993, it arrived in Carpenter's hometown of Issaquah. Sadly, though, only months later, he was killed in a car accident, leaving the statue's status in limbo. A couple years later, local artist Peter Bevis facilitated a deal to display Lenin here in this intersection until the family finds a buyer. That was almost 30 years ago. So here it sits, an unlikely Cold War-era landmark in a city that played a huge role for America.
Not one
during
bit
World
of
War
graffiti.
II.
Not one.
Now, I know someone's probably going to find a banknote or someone who co-signed a loan. See, Jew. Okay, sure, fine. But Jews make up about 2% of the greater Seattle area. So they wouldn't be able to be the reason that statue that has 4.5 stars on Yelp. You know what may contribute to it? If you're looking for modern-day Bolshevism, King County, where Seattle sits, is one of the bluest counties in the country. So if you're trying to identify the drivers of modern-day Marxism and Bolshevism. Yes, you will find quite a few Jewish Americans because you'll find a lot of them in intelligentsia and a lot of them in endeavors that involve the mind as opposed to the hands, not a very robust physical people. But with that
they can do
statue,
it, they just don't want to.
you're far less likely to run into this.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that.
Far less likely to run into that than you are to see this.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing, too. And I know we're going to have to leave you. And this is one of the, no one wants to wade into these conversations right now because I know someone will say, you're paid by the Jews to say this. Of course people will say that. You know what? You sound like a liberal. You sound like a Bolshevik. I've been around here a long time. You know what people used to say? Oh, you don't support the Kyoto Protocol, first the Montreal Accord, then the Paris Climate Agreement. You must be paid by big oil. And that is 2 degrees of retarded, lazy arguing. First off, it's not something that can be proven or disproven. So that's lazy. It's not a good argument. Second, you could be paid by big oil or have received a check from and still be right in saying a 0.3 degrees Celsius increase in temperature over the next century will not have catastrophic results to the point that we believe the WEF should be in charge of what we drive. It's 2 layers of lazy arguing. And I've said I will open this up to any commentator who's willing. We can have a third-party auditor look at the books. I can tell you not only have I never received a dime from any foreign entity, any foreign country, we also don't receive money from nonprofits who undoubtedly have a lot of influences that may be both domestic and foreign.
Yeah.
It's the only place.
Which it's funny how nonprofits seem to make so much money. And everyone there usually turns out
Like
to be
I said,
rich.
I'm going to disagree with Jews on a lot, the left on everything, blacks on a lot, the left on everything, women on a lot, even feminists on a lot, the left on everything. And the threat still exists. There are still people pushing it right now. Because it's not going to be done at the tip of a bayonet. But what were the Bolsheviks seeking to destroy? It wasn't just the Tsars, and it wasn't just the ruling class. They knew that to destroy a society, in order to have a culture, in order to have a society where you could say there was no subordination because everybody was subordinate, you had to destroy, and I don't mean institutions like academia or the entertainment industry, you had to destroy godly institutions like the family, like community, like moral absolutes that were agreed upon as a society. You have to do away with all of that, deconstruct it, so you can replace it with a new deity. And that deity, that new God, is always the state. So be aware of it and understand who it is that you're fighting. You let me know if you think that's fair. Oh, you're still here? And you're still...
Well... I don't know. All I do know is the left does... They worship communism and communists way too much. They'll say things like socialism, but that's not what they're pushing for. That's just their... As George Carlin would say, that's just their... utilizing language to confuse and distract stupid people, basically. I mean, I still never at work and never to upset someone, but I still refer to my dad as a cripple because he was. He referred to himself as a cripple. People would want you to say handicap or differently abled or physically challenged. Me personally, I think the physically challenged sounds like someone who just went on Double Dare from the 90s. But I don't know. I think us softening languages is softening us as a people. Words can never hurt you. Sticks and stones, right? But as far as what it's doing to us culturally, us becoming violent because we're afraid that people will use words that might hurt someone's feelings is kind of hilariously ironic in a way that you can't make up in a Saturday Night Live sketch. Okay. But, God, communism. It sounds like a good idea when you're in your teens, 20s. When you're poor and the thought of spreading the wealth sounds like a good idea. But if you would just do something with yourself, you can find yourself out of poverty. You won't be rich, more than likely, but you will be well off. You don't have to live a traditional life to be well off, be by yourself, and have money to spend. You won't be able to go on vacay as often, but you will get to enjoy your time. Find people who you love, whether it be a partner, just a good group of friends to go do whatever you enjoy doing together. But all in all, just make better choices. I've made really bad choices and gone through a lot of really rough spots of my life. And then I made less shitty choices with what I had left afterwards. And I've done okay for myself. I'm not doing great. I'm certainly not doing great on YouTube. But I do have some really good followers who are here just about every show. From Evil Sizer to to the rest, and now to old Yanuka here, who's been here steadily for the last couple of shows, and it's very much appreciated. Mask Shapeshifter's another one, and I've had another couple of pop in and out. I do this to do it. I'll always take suggestions if someone wants to see something or see me cover something. I'm always open to that, but at the same time, I do it because it's fun, and I do it because my friends always ask me my opinions on things, and they always like the way that I put things. I haven't really got to do that here. I'm still trying to find my footing a bit, but I am mostly just trying to stay consistent until the epiphany hits, we'll say. So in the meantime, I'm going to be just a commentator until that epiphany hits me, and hopefully it's enjoyed when it does. And then I'll be working on my stand-up outside of here, and I'll start posting those on TikTok and YouTube eventually once I feel that they're up to snuff. But in the meantime, this has been I appreciate you all for being here. I don't really have a good final thing to say here, but I very much appreciate everyone who comes into here, and especially when you keep the engagement up in the chat. So thank you to Yanuka1 for that. But in the meantime, guys, this has been